which he is scheduled to lose to his opponent, Trish. We have a special election that is taking place in Colorado on June 25th, and she has a huge advantage being the Democrat nominee for that special election. I do believe that Greg Lopez will ultimately win that special election, and we all need to get out that vote. In Colorado's 3rd district, we did have a very close election, but we also had 50,000 Republicans not show up to vote. And maybe it's because those Republicans were frustrated at other elected Republicans who have failing conservative records, who refuse to stand with President Trump, and they felt abandoned statewide and nationwide. But no matter what, this is the time for us to show up and get out the vote. I do not believe me being here is making this a vulnerable seat. This is a huge move for conservatives in Colorado.
So just to be clear, Ms. Boebert, you blame Republican voters for the fact that you nearly lost a safe seat and not your own conduct.
When 50,000 Republican voters do not show up and think that their vote does not matter, that does make an impact on elections. That's why we have Get Out the Vote campaigns, and that is why we need to start collecting ballots and follow the rules that have been put in place by Democrats so we can start winning elections again. In the 3rd district, I campaigned hard, I governed well, I govern as I campaign. I have bipartisan work, and I have passed more legislation out of the House in this Congress than any other member in the Colorado delegation. I am proud of the work that I've done serving my constituents in the 3rd district and serving the entire state of Colorado.
We're going to hear from a few of you on this issue of electability. Ms. Flora, you said this week that poll, which granted is a Democrats' internal poll, right? So you always take that with a grain of salt. But you said that poll, quote, shows that Lauren can't continue to run from her drama and divisive antics that nearly cost Republicans one safe seat already. You wrote, we can't risk losing CD4 as well. We're talking about the safest Republican seat in Colorado's congressional delegation. Can you specifically outline for voters what you are talking about when you're referring to Ms. Boebert's drama and divisive antics? And do you really think it could lose a safe seat like this?
Thank you for the question, Kyle. I mean, the reality is CD4 has been redistricted. It is now a 73% suburban, 49% unaffiliated district. I have traveled all over the 21 counties and will work very hard to represent the rural areas as well. But with this change, and with CD3 being 65% rural, this is almost a mirror opposite. As I've traveled all over listening to voters, so many of the unaffiliated voters are Republicans who've left the party because they're tired of the purge and purify, the drama and the dysfunction. And many also are unaffiliated voters who do not understand, because no one has persuaded them that our policies are the very things that will solve the issues that keep them up at night. I do think it is vulnerable. I think the day of that will never happen in Colorado is long gone. And I think it's time that we have someone in this seat, which is one of the reasons why I'm running, where we can rebuild the party, where we can make it the big tent again. We can invite people to join us, and we can persuade our neighbors that we don't see them as the enemy. We see them as someone we want to represent and help solve the issues that are important to them.
Ms. Flora, thank you. I will note, you chose not to describe what you're saying as drama and divisive antics, but you spoke to the composition of the district. Mr. Holtorf, you come from the other end geographically of the district, so to speak. But do you share Ms. Flora's view that the safest Republican seat in Colorado could be up for grabs if your party nominates Ms. Boebert?
So, Kyle, thank you for the question. Colorado's electorate has changed. We need to accept that. Colorado used to be a red state. Then it became a purple state. Some people claim that Colorado is now a blue state. If you look at the state house that I served in, 46-19, that's pretty blue. If you look at the elected officials in there. So yes, we have to be sensitive to the changes of Colorado. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to serve Colorado. We're here to serve CD4, whether they're unaffiliated, whether they're Republican. And if you're elected to CD4, you're here to also serve Democrats in the district. And I feel I'm ready to do that. So yes, you bring up a very good point. And we need people that can lead. We need people that understand that demographic. So thank you very much for pointing that out.
I want to give Ms. Boebert an opportunity to respond after I ask the rest of you for a show of hands on this question. Who here believes that if Republican primary voters nominate Ms. Boebert, that she could realistically lose in November? Mr. Lynch, Ms. Flora, and Mr. Yu say they believe that she could realistically lose. Mr. Sonnenberg, Mr. Holtorf do not believe that she could realistically lose.
Let me clarify.
November.
I answered the question, so I didn't know.
Okay.
You wanted.
Do you believe that she could lose in November?
It's very possible. Yes.
Okay,
I'm going to raise my hand just to clarify. It's possible.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Boebert. An opportunity to respond to what they've said.
Yes. Well, it's interesting to hear Democrat talking points from my Republican opponents talking about this purge and purify process in the Republican Party. We just want people who are elected who actually represent our values. I have represented almost 30 rural counties in Colorado, and I am seeking to earn the support and votes from 20 more plus Douglas County. And having that on the ground work has shown so much unity in the Republican Party and bringing unaffiliated voters on our side. Having bipartisan legislation, having good governance in Washington, D.C., opening up the House floor for amendments to empower representatives to represent their constituents, and even working with our state's senators to get legislation across the line. I do not believe that I will make this seat vulnerable. This is a Republican district, and they want a Republican who has a 100% conservative voting record, as I do.
Thank you, Ms. Boebert. Many of you have identified immigration and border policy as the main issue in this race. So we're going to spend some real time now exploring that issue and your views.
More than 150,000 unauthorized immigrants likely live in Colorado. It's a population far larger than the biggest cities in the 4th Congressional District. It's about the population of Highlands Ranch and Parker combined, double the population of Loveland or Castle Rock. While there's been a recent surge in new arrivals, many of Colorado's unauthorized immigrants have deep roots in the community. In 2019, the Migration Policy Institute estimated that half have lived in the United States for 15 years or more. That mirrors federal statistics about unauthorized immigration from the Department of Homeland Security. Donald Trump is vowing to deport up to 17 million people using local police and the National Guard, and possibly the U.S. military.
Ms. Boebert, you're running an ad right now that says deport them all. That would be an enormous, unprecedented government action. So if you would please describe in detail how you see mass deportation playing out in the cities and towns of the 4th Congressional District, and include, if you would, who you think should be doing the rounding up, where folks would be detained before they're deported, and so forth.
First of all, having over 10 million illegal aliens coming into our country in under 4 years, this is unprecedented, and this is a massive lift from the federal government. When you have Joe Biden's administration flying illegal aliens from our border, from Central America into our interior, this is a problem. If they can fly them in, they can certainly fly them out. If buses can bring them in, buses can bring them out. We have got to secure the border, and Congress needs to use the power of the purse as leverage to get that finished and actually secure the southern border. We are impacted by this in Colorado with fentanyl overdoses, with having to defund our law enforcement officers, our firefighters. These are important jobs where funding is being cut because of the illegal aliens and the invasion that is taking place. This is a humanitarian crisis. We need President Trump back in office to ultimately see this through. But I take this so seriously that I led the charge to impeach Joe Biden for his dereliction of duty at the southern border.
I'll note that you didn't make any attempt to answer the actual question, which is who should be doing this? It would be an unprecedented government action. Who should go into Windsor or to Parker?
If the federal government is flying them in and busing them in, they can bus them out. They can fly them out. And certainly we have agents that can help assist in that. But before anything else, we have got to secure the border and shut it down. I have talked.
When you say federal agents, do you mean just Border Patrol, just ICE, or are you talking about? If we need to use the National Guard,
whatever it takes to keep our country safe.
How about local police, as Mr. Trump has said?
Anything to get our country back to some sort of normal is fine with me. And whatever President Trump puts out there, I certainly will talk with him and help enforce that.
Thank you very much. As you referenced, you introduced articles of impeachment against the president for his handling of the border. That move was blocked by Republican House leadership. They sent it to committees and said,
the inquiry was sent to committee. It was not blocked.
It was blocked by sending it to committee, so you didn't get the full House vote that you wanted.
No, I did get a full House vote, and it was sent to committee.
This is going to be a long evening if you speak over the facts.
Say it right.
So, question for everybody up here: Please raise your hand if, based on what you know now, you would vote to impeach President Biden over his handling of the southern border. Would you vote to impeach him for that? Everyone but Mr. Yu. Thank you very much.
Mr. Lynch, you've said that if our country is not going to enforce the immigration laws that are on the books, we need to take the quote-unquote bold step of changing them. You've called mass deportation a kind of extreme solution. What specific bold changes would you make in immigration law?
Yeah, well, I thank you, and I appreciate listening to the words of people that have never really passed a law here on the stage, to include Ms. Boebert and
I have
Ms.
passed
Flora.
And thank you.
And out of
no, and
that's
been signed into law.
So,
thank you. My Pueblo Jobs Act has been signed into law.
That we would just blanketly go after. We have a number of migrants that come into our state every year to work in our fields. So if we just blindly start rounding people up and sending them across the border, we run the risk of seriously impacting our ag community in this state. So the idea that we have folks that have never really done legislation trying to promote these sort of policies is very dangerous. These are issues that require smart, in-depth discussions before we go and start doing something as silly as, hey, let's just put buses and put them on them and get them out of here.
Okay, so you've told me what's silly. What is bold change that you would make?
Yeah, well, you know, what we need to do is look at our visa policies in the way that we allow people to stay here. I mean, here's the deal. I'm a small business owner. I would love to hire some of these folks. If we didn't legislate in the state of Colorado that I can't afford to hire them. So it's not just like round them up and go with the talking point of let's just throw them out of the country. We need to legislate. That's what we're asking for right here.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Lynch, how many of these 10+ million illegal aliens have visas? We are not talking about visa holders here. And I understand that you are promoting this indentured servitude and do not want people to come here and live the American dream. I've been to naturalization ceremonies, and coming here the right way is the most precious thing that our country offers. Yeah. It is so generous that we allow 1 million immigrants to come into our country, and they take that very seriously. Yeah. And for you to stand here and just say that you need workers, I think that is gross, and it is nowhere near on point. You're talking about visas, and that system is broken and needs some repair, but these 10 million illegals do not have them.
Congresswoman Boebert, I would love to see, Congresswoman, your legislation that you've done to do this. What is it? Because you have passed nothing.
We are in divided government, and I have passed legislation out of the House of Representatives. I work in the House of Representatives, not in the Senate, and I'm not in the executive branch. But I have passed legislation to secure our border.
No legislation.
Yes, I have. And to defund sanctuary cities. I have passed over 70 amendments to the House floor, a process that I fought to make available in the House of Representatives, something that hasn't happened in over a decade.
Because we don't want to have
Mr. Lynch, thank you very much. Mr.
boxing match here.
Mr. Holtorf, there's a question coming for you. Hold on a second. We're talking about jobs, right? Workers, right? But workers hold jobs, right? Jobs mean a lot to people, whether you are in this country legally or not, right? And also, jobs matter to the overall economy. A question on this for Mr. Sonnenberg. You have also called for mass deportations, and let's talk about that economic impact. So economists have said that Trump's plan would deport about 4.5% of the American workforce, and that would likely cause a recession and inflation as that many workers vanish out of the economy. A CU Denver economist says has seen the largest jump in food prices, about 20%. Based on what you're measuring. So there's a good question about what the Biden administration is doing about it, but there's also a question about what Republicans can do about it. Ms. Boebert, this session of Congress is on track to be one of the least productive in history in terms of the bills passed. Your Republican House colleague Andy Biggs said, "We have nothing to go out there and campaign on." Another House Republican, Chip Roy, said the Republican majority does not have one material, meaningful, significant accomplishment. And that's what the Republicans are saying. What has the Republican majority in the House done about the price of groceries?
Kyle, we have certainly tried, and Congressman Andy Biggs and Congressman Chip Roy, these are my colleagues that I serve alongside of in the House Freedom Caucus, and I share their frustration. On every battle, we have been in closed-door meetings with the Speaker, whoever that may be, Kevin McCarthy, Mike Johnson, and trying to use, as I said earlier, our power of the purse, that leverage, to actually accomplish something and force the Senate to take our legislation and send it to the White White House.
What is that legislation on food and grocery prices?
Energy is a great piece of legislation. Our H.R. 1 bill is our energy policy. I have 2 pieces of legislation that were included in H.R. 1 that would unleash our American energy production. And that is exactly what we need to do to begin to...
And how does that impact food prices? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to clarify.
When we are selling our resources and not regulating our communities into poverty and not relying on our foreign adversaries for our energy production, then we are unleashing our nation's full potential for economic development and prosperity, and it would lower inflation. So this is one huge step that we could do, but also take care of the reckless spending in Washington, D.C.
Thank you very much.
My favorite part of the debate's asking each other questions here. We're going to start this off with Mr. Sonnenberg. You get to ask one of your colleagues here a question.
You know, that opportunity arose at the last or at the very first debate, and I chose not to do a gotcha question to any of the other candidates. I'd rather talk about my issues, so I'm going to decline to send a question to any of my other opponents.
Understandable. Again, I know at that debate you were told that doesn't have to be quote-unquote gotcha, but I will accept the time back. Miss Flora, you may ask a question of someone else.
Jerry, you and I have always taken the higher ground. I only want to ask questions that deal with policy. So I do have a question. As we've talked about, Denver is being overwhelmed by tens of thousands of illegal immigrants. They're lured here by the promise of food, housing, cell phones, and even driver's license. You've been one of the few Republicans that has actually voted for driver's license for non-citizens. What is your thought about the responsibility that may play into incentivizing those desperate people to be coming to these cities?
That's a great question, Deb, and thank you for asking, because quite honestly, the motive behind voting for that bill and supporting that bill was so we know where they're at. We know who's here, why they're here, and where they're located. We also, if you have a driver's license, then you're required to have insurance to drive, and that was important as well. But the main reason was specifically to make sure we know where those illegal immigrants are.
Thank you, Mr. Sonnenberg. Mr. Holtorf, you get a question to another candidate.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity, and I will take this time to ask a question. In my 5 years in the State House, I passed 38 bills signed by the governor in a majority Democrat House and General Assembly. I know what it means for a bill to be passed and signed by governor or president. So for Ms. Boebert, how many bills did you prime sponsor? I said 38, I prime sponsored, not co-sponsor, because you can co-sponsor post facto. Anybody can put their name on a bill after it passes. How many bills did you prime sponsor in the U.S. Congress that actually were signed by the President of the United States?
So thank you so much, Richard. You know, it's interesting that you're touting the legislation that you have passed. You also say that you are a no-nonsense conservative. Well, I think the voters back home should know that a no-nonsense conservative should not have a failing Liberty score. We have the Independent Institute who scores representatives for their legislative record. And if you are not voting how you campaign, well, then you get a negative impact. And I'm the only person.
Would you like to answer the question, or would you like to talk about Liberty scores? You can answer the question, ma'am. It's okay.
Will. So,
I asked a very specific question. Please answer.
One of my favorite pieces of legislation that has been signed into law is my Pueblo Jobs Act that creates at least 1,000 jobs in Pueblo, Colorado. We worked to incorporate the BRAC process, so nearly $7 billion in infrastructure would not be bulldozed and go to waste. But there are also many other pieces of legislation that I've passed through the House. And
it doesn't matter if it's passed through the House. If the president doesn't sign it, ma'am,
government, and I'm not going to compromise my principles to just pass a bill that does not honor.
I would give you one more opportunity if you would like to answer his question, which is the number of bills you've prime sponsored that have been signed by the president.
So my Pueblo Jobs Act has been signed into law.
A number, please.
That is one.
Got it. Ms. Flora.
So, Kyle, I certainly have owned up to my night out in Denver. And, you know, I've gone on that public apology tour, and I'm grateful for the mercy and grace that has been shown. But I'm not going to continue to live life in shame and be beat up by this. And, you know, I would like to go back to
We're
my
actually
legislative
not
record for just a second.
We're not going to do that. You had plenty of time to answer the question. You chose not to.
Sure.
That's fine. I just want to make sure.
I'll have more time.
You have
Don't
apologized for the theater incident.
I certainly have.
And I just want to make sure. Did you apologize for the behavior that went on with you and your date or the vaping,
Kyle,
or did you apologize? Or pardon me. Or did you apologize for lying to voters about what you did that night and the disrespect that you showed to service workers that night? What specifically were you apologizing for?
I don't believe there was disrespect. There were things that were absolutely taken out of context.
There's video of your interactions with service workers. I'm asking.
Right.
Are you apologizing for the lying to voters or the business?
It's been reported that I flipped someone off, and I did not. So I mean, I think it's been very mischaracterized. I'm apologizing for you, Kyle Clark, getting footage and releasing that. And people seeing this in a very private moment.
Certainly. It was very important to figure out whether you were telling the truth
you just had
or
an
whether a
interview
public
recently with
agency was lying about your conduct.
You just had an
very
interview with
important for
CityCast Denver, and you were saying how disgusting it is to record someone without their knowledge.
Let's talk about the use of earmarks in Congress.
You did that very same thing and released it to the world.
Members request funding for pet projects. That's what an earmark is. And some Republicans have rejected that process as like wasteful and corrupt and that kind of thing. Colorado's Republican Congressman, former Ken Buck, did not participate in earmarks. Retiring Republican Congressman Doug Lamborn did not use earmarks. Ms. Boebert, when you were elected to Congress, you said that earmarks were wasteful. You said they foster corruption. You said they're a way to buy votes. And then you decided to start using them, too. So let me ask all of you, show of hands, please. Will you participate in the earmark process if elected to Congress?
Absolutely.
That is a yes from Mr. Lynch.
It depends on next year's
Pardon me,
rules.
please allow me to say these people's names, okay? Mr. Lynch, Mr. Holtorf, Mr. Sonnenberg. A no on earmarks from Mr. Yu.
It depends.
It depends from Ms. Flora. Okay. So I wanted to ask a follow-up question on the issue of earmarks. Ms. Boebert, you've repeatedly taken credit for projects in Colorado that you asked for funding for, but then you voted against the bill in the end. Bridge over the Roaring Fork River in Glenwood Springs, water treatment plant in Gunnison, I-70 interchange in Grand Junction. You're able to vote no and get the praise for voting no because you know that there are enough other Republicans who are willing to vote for those bills so they'll pass. My question for you is this, and just a short answer, it truly is a yes or no question. If you were the deciding vote, would you still have voted no and killed all of those projects in Colorado that you now take credit for?
Yes, and I would have worked for a process. I would have worked for a process to get those over the line, but I worked to get those in, and I have had over 80 initiatives signed into law through the appropriations process.
I appreciate the direct answer. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Mr. Sonnenberg, we are moving to you now. You led an effort in the state legislature to reclassify a hospital provider fee so the government could keep that money without voter approval, sidestepping the Taxpayer Bill of Rights.
If you would stop speaking, I can get
what about Arizona?
Now. All right, thank you.
Let's talk about that.
On January 6, 2021, after the pro-Trump mob that stormed the Capitol was cleared out, Congress reconvened to certify the election results. And Ms. Boebert was one of 147 Republicans who voted to overturn the election results. So I'm going to ask you each in turn, knowing what you know now, would you vote the same way that Ms. Boebert voted then to overturn the 2020 election results? And I'm going to start with Ms. Boebert. Knowing what you know now versus what you know then, would you change that vote or would you vote the same way? Please just a yes or no so we can get to everybody. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Lynch, would you vote the same way? You would not have voted to overturn the 2020 election. Mr. Holtorf?
No.
Mr. Sonnenberg?
No, I would not have voted to overturn the election.
Ms. Flora?
I would not have voted to overturn.
Mr. Yu?
No.
All right, so just for the record, Ms. Boebert voted to overturn the 2020 election.
Objected
She's the
to
only
the
one
Electoral
there.
College certification.
The only one up here who said that she would also make that same vote today. Let's do some more candidate questions, please.
Mr. Lynch, it is your turn to ask another candidate a question.
Well, Richard took all my thunder, but
let me step back. Go ahead.
So I don't care what you say. All of this is public, Congresswoman. 0 bills passed, 24 votes missed, fewer comments, and I appreciate the fact that you have taken over my campaign slogan of delivering for Colorado. But can you tell me how you actually have delivered anything?
Yes.
For the state of Colorado.
Thank you.
That has been signed in and is actually actionable from what you've done.
I understand that Democrat congressional campaigner Adam Frisch, you have his old campaign manager, and these are her talking points. I get that, but we're not at zero.
These are facts.
We are not at zero for legislation passed. I have passed my.
It's Googleable.
Let's let her answer the
question. I have passed my Pueblo Jobs Act that's been signed into law, but I've also passed over 80 other initiatives that have been signed into law. One single standalone bill is not the only way to get something signed into law. And I have over 80 initiatives that have been signed into law, whether that be through the amendment process, the appropriations process, or through the congressionally directed spending. And I have brought back almost $100 million in infrastructure and water projects to Colorado. Water storage in Rangeley, Colorado, $5 million there. I have advocated for the South Bridge in Glenwood Springs, Colorado for 3.5 years, and they were able to get a huge chunk of money, and the former mayor came to my office to thank me for my work in ensuring that that was done, and also the congressionally directed spending that went prior to that.
We got another minute of something you wanted to answer,
yes.
And Mr. Lynch gave you the opportunity to do that. Mr. Yu, your question for another candidate.
So I believe in taking the high road like Mr. Sonnenberg does as well, but I feel like I need to justify one of my previous answers. And this is regarding, I knock on about 500 doors a day. I've spoke to almost 40,000 people.
Is this a question
so
to
the
somebody?
one question I have is for Lauren Boebert. I'm surprised because 90% of the people out there don't know any of the candidates, and that includes Lauren, which is a surprise, which I guess not because she's not really part of this district or have a connection. But what worries me is because I said earlier I do feel the seat's in jeopardy. The reason why is because unaffiliates and even moderate-leaning constituents do not know you, don't like you, and are you ever going to make an attempt to talk to anyone outside the Republican Party?
Don't know me or don't approve of me, because those are two very different things that you're saying
Okay,
here.
so basically it's actually it's one and the same because they don't know you, and the ones that do know you.
It sounded like the question was, are you going to talk to anybody outside the Republican Party?
Absolutely, and I do on a regular basis. I enjoy meeting with people. I have lived a life of service, from McDonald's to serving people through my church in the local jail, these at-risk women, and also in my restaurant. I love engaging with people. That is my favorite thing in life, and so I absolutely do connect and bridge the unaffiliated and the Republican voters. That is why I've been able to successfully get bipartisan legislation passed through the House without compromising my principles, working with Senators Bennett and Hickenlooper even to have co-sponsoring legislation in the Senate for my initiatives. And my legislation comes from conversations with people in the district, meeting with county commissioners, even in blue counties or blue cities, meeting with their council members. And that is where my legislative ideas come from. And I put pen to paper and get them passed.
Thank you, Ms. Boebert. You get to keep talking because you get the last question to another candidate.
Sure. Peter, you and I are the only two here on this stage who have won a congressional primary. And, one thing that I really love and respect about you is the work that you were putting to talk to people that usually don't show up to a Republican event. I have lots of ideas on how to get more people to events, but you are doing a great job of going door to door and meeting with people one-on-one and talking about the issues. And so, Peter, my question to you would be, how do you intend to take all of that wonderful work that you're doing and communicating with unaffiliated voters and even Democrats and make promises that you would still not compromise any of our Republicans?